In this video, I'm going to be going over the main points of Anna Lembke's Dopamine Nation book to save you some time and help you if you're trying to balance your own dopamine and change your habits. Before we get into the tools for balancing your dopamine, Anna lets us know how the dopamine system, the motivation system, actually works. Because when we understand this, it helps us a lot for changing our behavior. So she explains it by sharing this sort of balance, looking at it like a pain and pleasure balance. I shouldn't say looking at it that way, that's the way it works in our brain. We have this balance, and when we push on either side, it affects the other one. So, if you don't know, dopamine is a neurotransmitter in our brain that has a lot to do with our motivation. When we have high dopamine, we feel good and we're motivated. If we have low dopamine, we are not motivated and we feel sad. When we engage in certain behaviors, it affects our dopamine. So, when you think of addictive things like social media, video games, alcohol, addictive sugary food, all these things, they spike our dopamine, so they make us feel really good in the moment. Now, so this increases this side of the balance, so we're feeling great, we have all that dopamine flowing in our brain. The problem is when we use so much dopamine so quickly, our body needs to replenish that dopamine. It needs time. And so the way it does that is it shifts the balance the opposite way. And so while it's restoring that dopamine so that we can be motivated and feel good again, we don't feel good. Our dopamine drops and we feel sad, we crave that thing again. And so the balance is tipped towards the side of pain. Now this is fine if we let our brain and body have time to replenish that dopamine, then we will eventually be restored to a balanced state. However, this is not what we do, of course. When we are in that feeling of pain and craving, we engage in those habits again, further tipping it towards the side of pain. Anna has this amazing quote describing this process, saying the reason we're all so miserable may be because we're working so hard to avoid being miserable. So we try to avoid this misery. For some people, it's scrolling social media. For others, it's eating a bunch of junk food. And that makes us feel good in the moment, but it continues to crash our dopamine to where all we want to do is engage in those addictive things again. And this builds a sort of tolerance and dependence on those things to where we need those things just to feel okay, to feel good. We need those things that spike our dopamine. And eventually we don't feel motivated to do much of anything else. Nothing else gives us the same enjoyment. Everything else takes more effort. We don't have the dopamine or the motivation to work towards things that improve our life. And that's really the problem of dopamine. So, how do we fix it? Well, Anna shares how the solution is simple, but it's not easy. To restore balance, we just need to give our bodies time. We need to do what's called a dopamine fast. And Anna recommends 30 days. For some people, it might be faster. For some people, it might be shorter. But if you're able to abstain from your old habits, eventually that reward motivation part of your brain will reset. Your dopamine will be balanced again. You'll feel motivated to do other things. You'll get dopamine from other things, and you won't feel as much craving for those addictive things anymore. So, of course, that's not easy. Going 30 days, even a few days from some of our habits is extremely difficult. But Anna gives us a number of different tools that can help us in the process. One of the first tools Anna gives us is called mindfulness. And mindfulness is really all about observing our sensations, our thoughts, and not reacting to them. And so, in the context of behavior and habit change, this is observing what we're feeling, our cravings for our old habits, our thoughts, and not immediately acting upon them. And so, this can be called the term for this is called urge surfing. And the reason that this works is because as we observe our urges, they come in a wave. We feel them, we feel like we need to engage in our old habit, but just like a wave, it comes back down. It's temporary. And so if we can simply observe it and not act upon it, it will lessen. And then now this is a skill. This is something you're not going to be perfect at first, but it's such an important skill in our modern world because it's basically impossible to avoid all of the different addictive things in our lives today. And besides that, we're going to have days where we're really stressed out and we just want to escape and feel good with some habit. And so if we can use this skill of mindfulness, then we can stay away from those things that we know are going to make our life worse in the long run. And that's not to say that these different behaviors don't have their place. It's okay once in a while to engage in them. But if we continually spike our dopamine, then as I explained earlier, we're going to build up a tolerance, we're going to be craving that thing all the time, and we're not going to feel as motivated to do other things. Now the next tool that Anna shares is what she calls self-binding. Self-binding is all about creating an environment, creating a system that helps you to not engage in your old habits. And so there's 3 ways or types of self-binding that Anna talks about. The first is physical, which is the most simple and can be incredibly effective. It's all about physically distancing yourself or making it as impossible as you can to engage in your old habits. So, for example, if you're trying to cut out things with added sugar from your diet, getting rid of any food in your home that has added sugar is a type of physical self-binding. It's going to make it very hard for you to engage in that habit. Now, for some habits, it's more difficult to physically self-bind. So the second type is what's called temporal. So this is about selecting a specific time that you allow yourself to engage in these habits so you're not just doing it all the time every day. And this can be a step in the process of eliminating that habit. So, for example, if you want to reduce your social media use, but you don't want to cut it out entirely, you might say, okay, I can go on social media for, X amount of minutes at the end of the day, after I eat dinner. And so that's going to make it easier for you to resist just scrolling randomly throughout the day because my time for going on social media is later. I'm going to have that and I look forward to that. So we can see this, another example with eating. People do what's called intermittent fasting. It helps them to, eat less throughout the day by having select times that they are allowed to eat. So the last type of self-binding is categorical. And this is eliminating certain types of activities. And it works well for things that you can't completely remove from your life. So with the social media example, you may think, okay, Instagram and Facebook are kind of a problem. I feel like I'm kind of addicted to those. However, long-form YouTube videos like this are helpful for me and I can engage in that type of social media. That would be an example of categorical self-binding. The next tool is actually pressing on the side of pain. So, just like when we press on the side of pleasure through engaging in these addictive habits and how it causes pain later, when we engage in something painful, Later, the balance tips towards the side of pleasure, because through pain, through things that take effort, we're actually creating dopamine. And so we have this abundance that's not going to cause a crash later. So, some things that can help to have that natural increase in dopamine are exercise. So, exercise, we can see this sort of rise in dopamine. At the beginning, it's hard to get started, but once you get started, you get that increase in these neurotransmitters that give you that motivation, and that lasts well after the workout is over. Another one is cold exposure. Cold exposure, very painful in the moment, but things like cold showers, ice bath can cause an increase in dopamine for up to hours after that cold exposure. And so this can really help as you're going through your dopamine fast. Your dopamine is lower. Doing some of these things can bring it back up, help you to feel better, help you to resist engaging in your old habits. Another tool and another pattern Anna has found in the recovery of different addicts is having radical honesty. I thought this was strange at first. How does being honest help you to change your habits? And there's a few reasons. One of them is that it strengthens the connection between the kind of dopamine area, the reward center of your brain, and your prefrontal cortex. And so the prefrontal cortex is all about goal setting, long-term planning. If we can connect the motivation part of our brain to the goal setting part of our brain, where we're thinking about doing things that improve our life, you can see how we can channel that dopamine towards things that will actually improve our life. And so being honest strengthens that part of our brain. Now, being honest is also important for developing a mindset of accountability. If we lie, it leads to developing this victim mindset to where our addictions are not our fault. And Anna talks about how if we have a mindset of a victim, then we're just going to remain mentally unwell. But if we're honest, if we're accountable, then we're going to make progress and we're going to be able to overcome our addictions. Now, speaking of accountability, another tool that Anna shares specifically for when we make a mistake or what's called like relapse is called pro-social shame. When we relapse or make a mistake, we could feel a lot of shame. That could lead us to this cycle that Anna talks about, where we just hide and we continue to engage in that habit to escape from those negative emotions. Now, the solution to this is what's called pro-social shame. And this is where we have a people or a group where we can feel accepted, where we can feel free and safe to share the mistakes we've made, and where people can give us compassion, let us know we're not alone, and can at the same time encourage us to do better. And so this combination of accountability and compassion allows us to continue to make progress when we've made mistakes. So we can see this, for example, in Alcoholics Anonymous, where people in a group can share what they're going through, but we can also have this with anyone in our life. Now, before I get to the last tool, if you're looking for someone to keep you accountable, to help you create a specific game plan, implement all these tools to overcome your habits, click the link in the description. I'd be happy to chat with you. Now, for the last tool, Anna talks about intimacy, connection, having people that we can connect with in person. This releases another chemical in our brain called oxytocin, which is also connected to dopamine. This is going to help us again increase our dopamine while we're going through our dopamine fast. So to kind of summarize, Anna suggests if you're feeling unmotivated, if you're addicted to some activity, then the way to balance your dopamine is to do what's called the dopamine fast. Is to abstain from that activity, preferably for at least 30 days. And these are some of the tools she shares for how to go about doing that. Now, if you want to learn more tools, learn about these in depth, please subscribe and check out my other videos.